Hello and welcome to the US election dialogues. The election day has gone into overtime. We still don't have the result for you. Unfortunately, the uncertainty continues. America could be staring at a constitutional crisis and possibly civil unrest. Even before the results are out and the votes have been counted, multiple American cities have witnessed protests. This includes Washington, D.C., where there was a scuffle between the police and the protesters. We can report the stabbing of 4 people in the US Capitol. And Donald Trump has declared victory even before the result has been announced. He wants to take this election fight to the Supreme Court. Joe Biden has suggested he may be winning, but he will not be the one to announce that result. What does this fight mean for America? To discuss this and more, let's go straight to our dialogue partners tonight. Joining us from Washington, D.C., Lieutenant Stephen Rogers. He's an advisor to the Trump campaign. Wendy Osifo, senior Democratic strategist, also with us from Washington, D.C. Eric Tannenblatt, a Republican strategist with us from Atlanta. And finally, we have Christina Antello, a senior Democratic strategist, again from Washington, D.C. Hello and welcome to all of you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Lieutenant Rogers, I've been asking this question of you for the past few days now. Let me ask this again. Is this going to be decided in court?
I believe it will. I believe that this will eventually be brought to the Supreme Court, and they will make the ultimate decision as to who the winner of this election is.
Wendy Osifo, it did not go the way the Biden campaign had predicted, considering the lead that Biden was given in almost all the opinion polls. It should have been an easy win for him. It hasn't been.
Well, I think for a lot of us, we knew it wasn't going to be an easy win. We knew this was going to come down to a slugfest, which is exactly what we're witnessing right now. And a lot of states are too early to call, whether you're looking at Georgia, you're looking at Nevada, you're looking at North Carolina. All of those states are too early, and some of them are just too close as well. So we have to continue to keep an eye on this. But what we know is that Donald Trump has not yet won the election, so he cannot consider himself victorious because there are so many votes, millions of votes left to be counted.
Eric Tannenblatt, Donald Trump wants to move Supreme Court to stop the vote count. And if the process to count the ballots is stopped, will that not amount to disenfranchisement?
Well, I don't necessarily know that you're characterizing that correctly. I think it's still too early. You know, President Trump made his comments last night. The votes are still being counted, as the previous speakers just indicated. And I think we may have a clearer picture by the end of the day today. These races are very close. We're down to about, 5 or 6 states. And I think we need to get every vote counted. And then there'll be some decisions. I don't know that we need to, send out flare guns and try and make this into a bigger production. We have a system in place in the United States. We have a court system in place if something needs to be challenged. But I don't know that this is going to be as disruptive as it has been portrayed at the start of the show.
I'm not the one who's challenging the system. Your own president is. And I know the votes are being counted, but they're being counted because those counting the votes have not listened to the president, who has said that this should stop.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because we have a process. Each state controls their elections in their state. And so every state has a different way in which they go about it. We don't control our elections at the federal level. That being said, every candidate and every campaign has every right to make sure that the elections are being held fairly and legally. But it's not something that the president of the United States gets to control the elections in all 50 states. That's just not the way our system is set up.
Well, the system is under strain, to say the least. Christina Antello, Joe Biden said today that he believes that he's on track to win this election, but the margins in the battleground states are razor thin. What's driving the confidence in the Biden camp?
Yeah, I think, Parky, you can disregard the temper tantrums of the president and what's going on. I think it's just that. I think he's just, upset that he had to cancel his party and upset that somebody called Arizona faster than he was ready to have it be called. But as for the confidence on the Joe Biden team, I think it's because there are multiple paths to get to 270, whereas the president only really has one narrow path, and anything that comes out that takes away from that ability makes his situation more and more dire. I think that Vice President Biden sees that there are multiple combinations of different states that are all trending his way with the mail-in ballots that are still to be counted, and to the point of the panelists before, those are going to be counted per state law. The president doesn't get to decide if the Supreme Court tells them to stop counting. Each one of those states have their own laws, and they will continue to count.
Well, as for Arizona, the Trump campaign has said we will win Arizona by 30,000 votes, despite it being called in favor of Biden. So that's where things stand. Lieutenant Rogers, the overall rate of voter fraud in America is 0.0009%. It's practically non-existent. Is Donald Trump simply trying to then cast a shadow of doubt over this election to stay in office by saying that there might be fraud in this election?
Look, I absolutely do not believe in those statistics. I worked in law enforcement for 38 years, and I could tell you there is a lot of voter fraud, probably not reported as it should be. There are dead people voting here in New Jersey. There were people's names that have been on tombstones for years that were submitted. Thousands of ballots have been found in trash cans and dumpsters. We've had postal workers indicted already. So the idea that the voter fraud is as low as the figures that you just gave, and I know they're not yours, they were given to you, is absolutely absurd. So what the president's going to have to do is bring a very strong case to the courts with regard to voter fraud and the fact that perhaps some of these state laws have not been followed the way they should be. And on that basis, it'll be heard before the Supreme Court. But let no one lead you to believe that the voter fraud is that low. That is absurd.
Wendy Osifa, I'd like you to respond to that.
I think that his comment is absurd. The voter fraud is very low in this country. This is just the rhetoric that Donald Trump and his campaign continues to put out into the ethos to basically try to undermine this election. This is what they've been doing for months prior to this election. No one is saying that voter fraud does not exist, but in the same token, your statistics are actually very correct. There's no one here taking ballots and dumping them and setting them on fire. This election is fair and square. Whether Donald Trump wins or whether Joe Biden wins, that is the will of the American people. We cannot sit here and start to undermine the election. America rests on its democracy. America rests on its principles. And if I tell you this is true. If Donald Trump wins, he will say that this election was legitimate. If Donald Trump loses, he will say that this election was illegitimate. We do not need a president that decides his principles based on whether he wins or loses. That's not a man, that's a child. And this country should not be run by children. It should be run by people who are equipped mentally to be able to hold the position of president of the United States.
Well, to be fair, Joe Biden too said that the only scenario where he will lose the election is when the votes have been tampered. It seems to me that both have been suggesting the same thing throughout. Eric Tannenblatt, I want to ask you this. Why is Donald Trump contesting an election result that is not even out yet? Does he fear that he's going to lose?
Well, this election's been going on for over a month now, in some places even longer. So, he and his campaign have every right, if they think that there are allegations of voter fraud, to make sure that that is either not the case or that there's some remedy if there was fraud. Again, these elections are controlled by each of our states, the way our system is set up. And so you're talking about 50 different states running 50 different elections, and every candidate and campaign has every right to make sure that the elections are being held fairly. And if they don't think so, there's ways in which that they can try and remedy it, and that's through the courts.
Christina Antello, will the Democrats contest the election in the event of a victory being declared for Donald Trump? Because many in the Democratic Party have advised to Joe Biden, including Hillary Clinton, that he should not concede defeat and challenge it in court.
I think all of that's going to depend on the specific circumstances of each one of those states. And I think, as we monitor each state and as they all report in their results, then I think that it will be a state by state decision. I don't think that it'll be a national kind of, the popular vote versus the electoral college type of challenge. I think it'll go state by state. And if there are any instances where voter intimidation or Trump tactics have tried to get votes to not count, for example, what we saw them try to do in Texas with 127,000 ballots that were cast in Harris County that was not particularly favorable to them when they thought Texas was in play and they were more scared there. I think that already kind of goes to their credibility. So if we see that start to happen in Michigan or Pennsylvania or what have you, then certainly we should challenge if there is the basis for it. But I think that's the difference. With Joe Biden's team, there will actually be legal standing and basis to do so, not just, hey, stop counting because I'm ahead and keep counting on that one because I'm behind.
Wendy Azifah, let's talk about Florida, a major battleground state that Donald Trump has won one more time. According to one claim, the Biden camp spent more than $100 million on ads to swing this state in his favor, and yet they've not been able to manage that.
I think that we have to stop looking at Florida as a swing state. Florida is not a swing state. It's a battleground state, but it's not a swing state. And that's really important. We have to know the demographics in there. And then there's also this swell of Latino voters in Florida that do not feel as though the Democratic Party speaks to them. We see a lot of Cuban Americans who have voted astoundingly for Donald Trump. So I think that after this election, a lot of research has to go into what are the needs of the individuals in Florida and why is it that this state is not turning blue? Because, again, like you said, there has been money poured into it, but whatever those tactics are not hitting. And we have to look at that. And I think one of those answers is the Latino vote in Florida.
Lieutenant Rogers, we have some news coming in from Wisconsin. This state has been decided in favor of Joe Biden. All of the ballots have been counted. I'm quoting from the Wisconsin Election Commission administrator, and he says Joe Biden has won Wisconsin by 20,697 votes.
Well, if that's the case, then that's the case. I mean, unless the president plans to challenge that based on whatever they feel they have to challenge that with, that's the way it is.
Isn't that a big statement? Because Donald Trump became the first Republican presidential candidate to win the state since 1984.
Well, the fact of the matter is we're a nation of laws. You know, contrary to all the rhetoric you hear about the Republican Party and the president wanting to inflame the system, we agree it's a nation of laws. And if all those votes were counted and all those votes were legitimate, and if the Republican Party or the president feel that they have a basis for challenging those votes, then so be it. But as it stands now, it is what it is.
Eric Tannenblatt, this election could come down to two more states now, Michigan and Pennsylvania. And the New York Times, I know how Republicans feel about the New York Times, but it has predicted that Biden is expected to win these states narrowly. Is the picture looking dimmer for Donald Trump?
Well, look, going into this election, you know, in the weeks leading up to the election, there were a lot of states that looked more competitive. You just mentioned Florida. But, you know, we have always felt, I think everyone would agree, that this was going to come down to the three states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And it looks like that's where it's coming down to, is Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And, you know, so there shouldn't be any surprise that we're, you know, boiling this is going to get boiled down to three states, and we're just going to have to see how it plays out. And whoever is the victor wins. So I don't think we need to read into it too much. And this has been a very hotly contested election. The country has been very polarized and divisive. But hopefully this is going to come to an end, and we're all going to come together and move on.
But that is the question. Can all of you come together? And by you, I mean the American systems and the leaders. Christina Antello, even if Donald Trump wins this election, the Democrats are expected to retain their majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. How will the president then push his agenda, considering the fact that this divide has only been widening between the two sides?
No, I think that's right. I think that, you know, Democrats have lost some of those seats in the House, so it becomes even tighter there. I think that Republicans will maintain the Senate as well. Divided government is gridlock, and that will be a hard road ahead, which we've seen over the last 6 months in the negotiation of a coronavirus aid package. I think that would continue if Trump stays there in the White House. I do have hope that if Biden wins the White House, though, and even if the Republicans keep the Senate, that actually will start to see some movement, some policies be able to move forward. Obviously, some agreement with the House and the Biden team to be able to move forward. Though I give, you know, Senator McConnell, the leader there in the Senate, all of his tacticians due credit because they have kind of played a masterful game over the last several years. But in any event, you're absolutely right. There will continue to be division among the American people. There will continue to be division among our legislators and our governors. I think that will only continue because I think if nothing else, there will be a continuation of Trumpism, even if Trump himself is not here, even if that's Ivanka Trump or somebody else along those lines. This will be the new way that Republicans start to campaign. And I actually am more fearful for that on the Republican Party because I felt like there was a lot of times where we've been able to find bipartisan agreement. And I think that has just been thrown out the window.
Lieutenant Rogers, After Trump's proclamation of victory earlier today, protests broke out across several cities in the U.S. There was a scuffle between policemen and protesters near the White House. A stabbing has been reported in Washington. At least 4 people have been stabbed. Is the president pushing America towards more violence by his preemptive refusal to accept defeat?
No, he is not, and neither is the Democrat Party. So I want to get that absolutely clear. None of the parties in this country want violence. They don't want to see any of this. But I'll tell you who's fueling the fire. This is the mainstream media in this country. They have been fueling a fire across this country like I've never seen before in my lifetime. And they need to get back to journalism. They need to get back to reporting the news, not making the news, creating the news to add fuel to the fires that we see raging across the country. So if there's anything both parties can do as we move forward is to address that problem, because it is that problem that's causing division across the country. Not the Democrat Party, not the President of the United States, the mainstream media.
That's a very easy explanation. I know the media makes mistakes and the media should be pulled up for the mistakes. But to blame everything that is wrong in the American system on the media is something that I will not agree to. When do you see for your comments on this? Is it the media's fault that people are out on the streets and shop owners are having to board up their shop fronts because they fear more violence in the days ahead?
No, not necessarily. I think the media reports on what is happening and what the pulse of the country is. The truth of the matter is our country, the United States of America, has been divided. But once Donald Trump got into office, we became more divided. And you can see that traced back to when we had incidents in Charlottesville, Virginia, when he said that there were good people on both sides, when he was talking about protesters and neo-Nazis and considered both of those groups good people. We can see that when Donald Trump has more issues with what is happening with protesters as opposed to addressing the issues why these protesters are even protesting. We can see that when Donald Trump says that there is no such thing as systemic racism within the country. We can see that when he wants to talk about Chicago as a straw man, but there's other issues in our country. Donald Trump has divisive rhetoric. That's something that cannot be denied. And the people who are supporting him are lighting fuel to that divisive rhetoric by not holding him accountable. Our country is a nation on the brink, and it is not something that Donald Trump created. It is something that Donald Trump has fueled. And those are two different things. So he has to take accountability for the ways in which he has made this country that was already, in a sense, divided, even more divisive. It's not the media's fault.
Well, yesterday Donald Trump said that he's done more for the African American community than any other U.S. president, barring perhaps Abraham Lincoln. Quite a statement that, I'm sorry, Eric Tannenblatt, whoever wins this election, do you agree that the first priority of that president should be to try and heal America and try to bring everyone on board and take the society forward together? And is Donald Trump up to the task, according to you?
Well, absolutely. That's the job of whoever is ultimately the winner of the election. Elections get very heated, especially as you get down to the wire. But once an election is done and a decision is made as to who's won, that leader, that president, whether it's President Trump or President Biden, will need to heal the country. They'll need to reach out, work with people across the aisle, and see if they can tamper down some of the divisiveness. Donald Trump came to Washington as an outsider. He was never a politician. He didn't know how Washington worked. He's now served as president for 4 years, so he doesn't have the excuse of not understanding how the systems of government work. And if he does get reelected, then it will be his job to heal the nation, just like it will be for Vice President Biden.
Well, he can't play the outsider card anymore. He's been in office for 4 years. Christina Antello, the world over, the discussion is on these lines. This is the world's oldest democracy, and it is fumbling on election night and not being able to figure out who is going to lead the country for the next 4 years. Do you think this is one of the most difficult periods for American democracy?
I would separate those two issues. The election itself is not a problem, I don't think. I mean, we're suffering through a global pandemic. And to help accommodate that, we are making sure that votes are being counted, but in slightly different ways to make accommodations to folks to keep them safe. And so if it takes an extra day or 2 days or 3 days to count some votes, I think that's totally okay. And we should be okay with that as a society. But on the other front, what you're talking about on the divisiveness of the country, I mean, yes, that continues to be the issue. I mean, when the president calls out, folks in Texas for trying to run a Biden bus off the road, patriots, and when you have 13 white male domestic terrorists get arrested without incident for trying to kidnap a Democratic governor at his urging to liberate Michigan and have plans for other ones, that is the kind of rhetoric that is the hyperbolic that is separating us. And that is what I think Donald Trump is incapable of doing. And he's not interested in it. That is not at all on his agenda. Number one for whoever's elected president is this coronavirus. We need to get that figured out to keep the health and safety of our citizens back in check after 230,000 needlessly died. But with the division, we've already seen from Stephen Miller, even on the immigration side as one example, he's got an agenda that is even more diabolical than what he did in the first go round. And there's more of that coming. So no, I don't think he's capable of it. I don't even think he's interested or that he's paying attention to that.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, and I hope the result is out sooner rather than later. I'm out of time here, but thank you very much to all of you for joining us here. It's been more than 12 hours since the counting began, but we do not have a winner just yet. We do hope we have one soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.